Hi there. In this lecture we see a very instructive game, Bobby Fischer against James Sherwin, 1957, New Jersey Open, round 7. Let's have a look. Fischer kicked off with e4. We have the Sicilian defense, knight f3, and now e6. This does reflect a kind of weakening of the dark squares, and Fischer plays d3 here, the King's Indian attack, which usually he plays against the French defense, this kind of move. But because of the inclusion of that French defense style move, e6, it seems as though Fischer felt this was appropriate. We see knight c6, g3, knight f6, bishop g2, bishop e7, both sides castle, knight bd2, rook b8. Now the rook on b8 could be a potential target on this diagonal, potentially one day when the knight gets out of the way. So that's something to bear in mind with a move like rook b8. Well intentioned. We see rook e1, d6, c3, b6, and now d4 is played. Here it seems black should be able to equalize with, for example, c takes d4, c takes bishop b7. If white tries the break e5 here, it will be slightly premature. D takes, knight g4. This position, black's got things like bishop a6, and it can start to get uncomfortable for white quite quickly. So, in other words, basically here, if we look at this again, the move a3 could be a good safety, but it's only about equal, this position, it's about even. So we have, though, queen c7, and we have the makings of what looks like pieces that are on a potential skewer, even though it's not apparent how that could be the case right now. But you could imagine that if this pawn was removed, we do have pieces on a skewer, and we have the move e5, which is pretty ambitious. In fact, from a technical point of view, perhaps more theoretically correct is actually to play knight f1. It seems, Fischer was kind of focused on that skewer possibility. If knight f1, it does keep the tension. It's less forcing, but this is a nice edge for white, for example, like this, where white's got possibilities of d5, a nice space advantage. It looks like a strong continuation. e5 is quite forcing, and black does need to play very, very carefully now. And black didn't. Knight d5. This is actually a kind of disaster move in its own right. D takes e5, d takes. This position would have been much better for black and safer. But after knight d5, there are forcing move possibilities now. And the strongest is actually to play c4, to dislodge this knight immediately, and then e takes, and then a3, and this is all kind of forcing here. And now there's a forcing move d5, and this would just lead to a huge, gigantic position for white, a winning position like this, for example. It's really kind of crushing stuff, where the knight on a6 is kind of very sad. So, yeah, c4 seems to be the most accurate move here to get that kind of situation. E takes is another lucrative forcing move, though, and we see bishop takes, and now knight e4. And there is a concern that white will play c4, will take, and then bishop f4. It's only the knight controlling f4 right now, which stops this skewer. And black plays c4. This might not be the best way to approach the c4 threat. Bishop a6 is to be preferred, it seems. And, for example, here, white's advantage is there, but it's small. It's not that large. In the game, after c4, this is a tension release. And we have knight takes d6, queen takes, which seems to leave black with a fairly comfortable knight sitting perched happily on d5. And how can black possibly, be a victim of this skewer possibility? Well, we see knight g5, and now knight ce7, and now queen c2 threatening checkmate. The knight goes to g6, and now we see h4. It seems there are a couple of issues. The immediate being h5 is very dangerous. We see knight f6, the knight unpurchased. But this is not the end of the pain for black here. guess what Fischer plays in this position if I give you 5 seconds to pause the video. Okay, knight takes h7. Yeah, this is a very, very interesting move indeed. Knight takes was played. If king takes, then bishop f4, relying on that pinned knight. So that is, the skewer is actually shown on the board here in this variation. And so that'll just be winning that rook. So after knight takes was played. And bishop f4 is knight takes. So actually we have h5. Just trying to nudge that knight away. The knight goes desperately to h4. And we have the skewer. And now queen d8. So in this situation, though, Fischer plays the absolute best move. Taking on b8 immediately would be bad. He didn't play this. He played actually g takes h4. Let me show you why. Bishop takes, there's knight takes g2. And if king takes, bishop b7 check. And then the b8 bishop is taken, and black's actually doing very well. So we have g takes h4, so the rook's still attacked. The rook moves, but now h6 piercing into the dark squares of black's king position. And this is very dangerous, so it represents actually now a pawn sack, because Fischer's not interested yet in taking on b7. He's more interested in demolishing black's king side. H takes g7. Taking on b7 would give black a dangerous attack on the light squares anyway. So it's all about king safety now, not about material. This hits the rook, so there's no time to take the bishop. So it hits the rook. And now rook e4, which threatens things like, well, specifically bishop e5 check to win the queen. So the queen moves, but now rook e3. And this is very dangerous. We see f5. Black's still inviting white to take the exchange, but Fischer's not interested. He's more interested in the king. Rook h3, queen e8. Now check, and this is really vicious, this dark square bishop, without a counterpart. This is a magnificent piece in the center, and a magnificent pin now after knight f6. And we see queen d2. This is devastating. The dark squares are really weak. King f7, queen g5. We see queen e7. But now Fischer is able to cash out here elegantly with bishop takes f6, which weakens the h7 square. And rook h7 check is used. King e8. And now queen takes f6. And black didn't want to lose material like so simply, and actually played rook takes h7. But white is just clearly winning this with just moving the queen now. That would be clearly winning. But Fischer played an even stronger move. Can you guess? If I give you 5 seconds here, what did he play instead of queen e5? Okay, even stronger, bishop c6 check. But it is a winning position anyway. And if the game continued, the game actually ended here, black resigned. If it continued with bishop d7, then queen takes e6 check, queen d6, bishop e7. As an example, this is just much better for white. So it is interesting, this game, and it does show the potential of a skewer, but also maybe the more advanced players might appreciate that actually e5 might not have even been the best move to try and exploit this situation. If black had played correctly, does this scale up to stronger and stronger opponents? Fischer's still in his early development. He's not beyond improvements here. And e5, if black had played d takes, this would be a different kind of story entirely, because the pawn seals up this diagonal. It's interesting that, the inappropriate response, knight d5, falters actually specifically to c4 and then exploiting this diagonal, well, with d5. So c4 is such a powerful move, in fact. But e takes is strong, and we do get the skewing diagonal being celebrated in a beautiful way, nevertheless, here with this continuation with this h4. It's a very, very dangerous position for black indeed. The possibility of knight takes h7 and h5 is imminent, so it drew the knight back. Yeah, it's a very dangerous situation. So it drew the knight back, which was happily perched, but still the surprising knight takes h7 anyway. So it's beautiful tactics revolving around this skewer diagonal for sure, though very instructive how to exploit a skewer, and then translate that into specifically getting a very, very strong attack around the king. It's just translated, piercing into the dark squares. The bishop without a counterpart is just huge here. That e5 square is absolutely gigantic for the bishop. So yeah, it positionally kind of collapsed for black as well as tactically in the end. Very, very interesting game. And this is, you know, one of those that Fischer found, you know, in his most memorable, you know, games as well. But it is also like an instructive game. Taking out the dark square bishop at d6, yeah, giving white this bishop without a counterpart is a serious issue in my view in its own right as well. The undertone to all this, that is a serious asset to use. It's not just tied up with winning material. It can be used to damage further, you know, black's king. If the dark squares can be sliced especially, that's magnificent for this dark square bishop. So yeah, a superb exploitation there after the inappropriate response of not trying to seal up that diagonal. It was really tapped into very strongly there from Bobby Fischer. Okay, I hope you got something from that. Thanks so much. Hi guys, I hope you really enjoyed this video. If you want more Bobby Fischer content, check out my Kingscrusher TV page. And if you go to the bottom of it, it starts at the bottom with 1970 to 1992. I also have 2 other Bobby Fischer courses. I found him absolutely fascinating to study. So there's 1956 to 62 early in his career, and there's 1963 to 68. So I hope you find those interesting. You might want to check them out, all the free samples. And I hope you really enjoyed this video. Comments, questions, likes, shares, always appreciated. Thanks very much.